The wind tore across the Highland road, carrying with it the sharp scent of rain and heather. My suitcase toppled onto the gravel as the taillights of the rental car shrank into the distance. For a moment, I thought they might stop. They didn't. Silence pressed in, thick and unreal, as if the land itself were holding its breath. That was the instant I understood. My daughter had left me here, deliberately. Not by accident, not out of carelessness. She had abandoned me. I stood there, 67 years old, dressed in clothes I'd chosen carefully for this family trip, watching the last connection to home vanish behind a bend in the road. I had 43 pounds in my wallet, no signal on my phone, and the sudden knowledge that whatever I had believed about my daughter's love was a story I'd been telling myself for far too long. Jessica had always had a sharpness in her, the kind that cuts when you get too close. Her husband, Brian, polished it to a blade. Together, they wore their disdain like a shared joke, leaving me the punchline. I'd ignored it, the way mothers do. I told myself this trip to Scotland was a chance to repair things, to remember that beneath the sarcasm and eye rolls, she was still my little girl. But children grow, and sometimes they grow into strangers. The Highlands stretched endlessly around me, rolling green, dark stone ruins, the bleating of distant sheep. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like exile. My hand tightened on the suitcase handle until my knuckles burned. I thought of the years I'd carried Jessica alone, after her father walked out. The sacrifices. The second jobs. The nights I skipped meals so she wouldn't. Now, here I was, discarded on a roadside as if none of it mattered. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. The sound startled even me. What kind of mother gets stranded in a foreign country by her own child? The answer, I realized, was the kind of mother who refuses to stay stranded. I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped off the road toward the tiny cluster of stone buildings ahead. Somewhere in that village, there had to be a way forward. And I was going to find it. The village wasn't much of a village at all, 6 or 7 stone buildings crouched against the hillside like weary sentries. The streets were empty, slick with a sheen of mist that turned the cobblestones treacherous beneath my shoes. My suitcase rattled behind me, its wheels clattering loud enough to announce that I did not belong here. The first door I tried, a narrow shopfront with a faded sign promising post and telegraph, was bolted shut. The second, what looked like a home, offered nothing but dark windows and silence. Each rejection pressed harder against my chest. It struck me then that my daughter hadn't just left me in the middle of nowhere, she'd left me where nowhere refused to answer back. I caught my reflection in a cracked windowpane, a woman trying too hard to look composed. Lipstick slightly smudged. Hair flattened from travel. Eyes wide and wet, though I swore I wouldn't cry. I had promised myself after my husband died that I wouldn't let grief turn me small. But this, being discarded by my own child, felt like a new kind of widowhood, one I had no name for. A sound broke through the quiet. Faint at first, then clearer, music. Not the haunting drone of bagpipes I half expected, but a lively tangle of fiddles and voices. It drifted from a building at the far end of the street, its windows glowing with lamplight. For the first time since the car disappeared, my heart shifted. Not hope exactly, but something like it. I paused outside the heavy wooden door, my hand hovering over the handle. What was I supposed to say when I stepped inside? Excuse me, I've just been abandoned by my daughter. May I borrow your kindness for a few minutes? The absurdity of it struck me, and laughter bubbled up again, brittle and sharp. A man passing might have thought I was mad. Perhaps I was. But standing there wasn't going to change anything. The Highlands would not swallow me whole just because I wished to vanish. So I pressed my palm against the door and pushed. The music cut short. Conversations died. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I drew a breath and spoke, my voice steadier than I felt. Evening. I wonder if I might ask for help. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The pub smelled of peat smoke and ale, its low ceiling stained by decades of fires. A fiddle rested against a chair, abandoned mid-tune. Every face in the room seemed carved from stone, weathered, suspicious, waiting. Then a woman stepped forward from behind the bar. Her hair was gray, pulled back in a no-nonsense knot, and her eyes held the kind of warmth that only comes from surviving storms. She wiped her hands on a towel and looked me over with quiet calculation. American, are ye? Her accent wrapped around the word like wool. I nodded. Yes. I need a phone. I'm in a bit of trouble. A ripple went through the room. Not laughter, but something close, a collective exchange that said we've seen trouble before, and yours is not the usual kind. The woman, Moira, I would learn, set down her towel. What kind of trouble leaves you dragging a suitcase into Kilbride at dusk? I opened my mouth to explain, but the words tangled. How could I admit aloud that my own daughter had discarded me like luggage? The humiliation clawed at my throat. Yet silence was worse. So I forced the truth out, stripped and raw. My daughter, she left me on the roadside. She said I was a burden. The room went so quiet I could hear the crackle of the fire. A few heads shook. One man muttered something sharp in Gaelic that needed no translation. Moira's expression softened, but there was no pity in it. Then she's a fool, she said firmly. Sit yourself down before ye fall down. The chair creaked under me as I lowered myself, dizzy with both shame and relief. A mug of tea appeared in front of me, steaming, strong. My hands shook as I wrapped around it, drawing in the heat. And then it hit me. Not the betrayal, I had already felt that, but the hollow space it left behind. Jessica's absence wasn't just cruelty, it was freedom, terrifying and absolute. For the first time in years, there was no one demanding, no one dismissing, no one controlling what came next. I took a sip of tea and set the cup down with new steadiness. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the bruises of the day, something stirred, not despair, but defiance. Jessica thought she had ended me. She had no idea she had just given me a beginning. The next morning, Kilbride was shrouded in fog, the kind that swallows sound and bends light. I woke in the small room Moira had offered above the pub, disoriented until memory came rushing back, Jessica's laughter, the car pulling away, the endless road. My phone, finally charged, blinked with missed messages. For a fleeting second, I hoped, foolishly, that one might be from my daughter, an apology, a plea to come back. Instead, every notification bore the same subject line, unusual account activity. My hands went cold as I dialed the bank. The voice on the other end was polite, practiced, devastating. My accounts had been drained. Hotel stays, luxury shops, spa treatments, all charged in my name. Transfers authorized with signatures I had never signed. Savings that had taken a lifetime to build, gone in weeks. When the call ended, I sat on the narrow bed, phone slipping from my fingers. My chest ached with a pressure so sharp I thought I might break. To be abandoned was cruelty enough. To be robbed, by my own child, was a kind of violence words couldn't contain. A knock at the door broke through the fog of shock. Moira entered, balancing a tray of coffee and oatcakes. She saw my face and set it down without a word. Tell me, she said simply. So I did. Every detail, every stolen dollar, every lie Jessica had spun. By the time I finished, my voice was ragged. Moira folded her arms. That's no daughter. That's a thief. And you're not to shoulder the shame of her sins. But shame clung to me all the same. What kind of mother raised a child who could look into her eyes and steal everything? I should call the police, I whispered. The thought tasted bitter. But she's my daughter. Moira's gaze didn't waver. And you're a woman with a choice. Either let her write the end of your story, or take the pen back yourself. I stared at the steaming cup of coffee between us. For 67 years, I had played the part of caretaker, peacemaker, giver. Now, stripped of money, dignity, and even family, I had nothing left but the chance to decide who I would be next. Outside, the fog began to lift. Light caught on the pub's old window, flashing like a signal. Perhaps it was. The warehouse door groaned open on rusted hinges, releasing a breath of stale air and dust. Moira's lantern cast a shaky circle of light, revealing rows of forgotten relics, trunks stacked like tombstones, canvases veiled in grime, porcelain figures staring blindly from the shadows. This is what I've never touched, she said. Too much grief. Too many memories. But maybe it's what you need. I stepped inside, my shoes crunching on scattered glass. Every object whispered of other lives, wealthy families, lost fortunes, someone's treasure reduced to clutter in a forgotten room. I reached for a chest and pulled back the sheet. A gleam of brass fittings winked through the dust. It should have thrilled me. Once, I would have catalogued every detail, every maker's mark, every provenance trail leading back through time. But now, the discovery cut differently. My daughter had stolen my savings, yes, but worse, she had tried to erase me, to write me off as useless, a burden unworthy of her future. I pressed my hand flat against the chest's wooden lid. For years I had lived as if love was currency, giving it freely to a child who spent it carelessly. Now I understood, Jessica hadn't abandoned me because I was weak. She had abandoned me because I was strong enough to survive without her. And that terrified her. The realization split through me like lightning, leaving both devastation and clarity in its wake. I was not the woman left crying on a roadside. I was the woman standing in a forgotten vault of history, capable of building something new with her own hands. Moira watched me, silent. She didn't need to say what her eyes already spoke. This is your beginning if you want it. I pulled back another sheet. Beneath it, a small painting emerged, colors dulled by grime yet alive with detail, a highland landscape, brushstrokes pulsing with the rhythm of wind and earth. My throat closed. This isn't clutter, I whispered. It's legacy. For the first time in months, the weight in my chest eased. Grief gave way to something sharper, steadier, resolve. Jessica had thought she'd taken everything. But she had only opened the door to everything I had forgotten I could claim. I turned to Moira, the painting in my hands, my voice calm and certain. I'm not broken. I'm just getting started. Snow fell the morning I left Kilbride for Edinburgh. Not a storm, just a quiet scattering of white across the fields, softening the stone walls and heather hills. The village stirred awake below me, smoke curling from chimneys, the sound of church bells carried thin on the wind. Inside the warehouse, what had once been a tomb of dust now breathed like a gallery. Paintings hung where they could be admired. Jewelry sparkled under carefully placed lamps. The air smelled of polish instead of mildew. Each object had been touched, studied, named. And in naming them, I had named myself again. Moira stood beside me, arms folded, pride tucked into her smile. Not bad for a woman who arrived with a suitcase and no plan, she said. Not bad at all, I answered. The truth was harder to say aloud. I was no longer the woman who had begged scraps of affection from her daughter. I had become someone else, someone who no longer confused cruelty with love, silence with safety, family with loyalty. Jessica had called once more after the bank froze her accounts. I didn't answer. I let the ringing fade into silence, as natural as a wave withdrawing from shore. Some ties don't need cutting, they unravel on their own when you stop holding them together. I looked down at the highland landscape we had cleaned and framed, the one that had first stirred me awake. Its colors glowed now, freed from grime. Green fields, a pale sky, mountains that seemed to breathe. It wasn't just a painting, it was a mirror, proof that beauty survives even after being buried, dismissed, forgotten. I touched the frame lightly. This was never hers to take, I whispered. I wasn't speaking about Jessica. The auction would come, and with it money, security, the thrill of new beginnings. But what mattered more was this: I had stepped into exile and found not ruin, but release. When I finally walked outside, the snow had thickened. The road stretched ahead, winding and pale, vanishing into mist. For the first time in years, the path didn't frighten me. I pulled my coat tighter, lifted my chin to the cold air, and began walking, free, unburdened, alive.